My name is Priscilla Pfeiffer, and welcome to Spark Your Inner Fire, a podcast for artists, performers, and closet creatives. You bring a lighter, and I'll bring the fuel. It's time to spark your inner fire. Hello, my name is Priscilla Pfeiffer. Welcome to Spark Your Inner Fire podcast. I have a special guest, Cree, owner of Cree8 Studios based in Las Vegas. Cree, say hello.
Hello, I'm so excited about being on here.
I'm so excited to have you. Cree is one of my very, 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 very best friends. I love Cree. He is like the awesome dudes I've ever met. He is the biggest creative genius I have met.
That's a lot to follow now, but okay.
Now that I've built you up, I'm so happy to have you on. But please tell the audience what you do.
So we build people's dreams, our nightmares here at Cree8 Studios. We basically build a lot of crazy stuff for the entertainment industry. We build magic illusions. We build special effects. We build sets. We build TV, commercial, movie stuff. We build haunted houses and scare props. We just basically build what anybody can dream up and comes to us and says, I want this. And we do, okay, let's make it happen.
So everything you make, there's no you basically have to make a prototype for everything you build.
Yes and no.
Okay.
A lot of times what we're building is the prototype, because a lot of times we're challenged with a time restraint or a budget restraint. And we don't want, anytime someone comes in, we want to build whatever they have. Like if someone comes in hey, I got 2 days and $5,000, we try to make it happen no matter what. So a lot of times there's not time for a prototype. A lot of times the product is the prototype. I would actually say 80% of the time there's no prototype. What we build, it's kind of got to work with one good shot chance. One good build, boom, it has to happen.
So you're always making the impossible happen with
Try to.
It's like impossible time frame sometimes, right?
It's funny because all the TV and reality shows always have these crazy timelines and always have these crazy builds, and that's usually made up. In our life here, in our world, that's every day, totally true. And usually it's 4 a.m. before we can solve the problem. And it's oh my gosh, how am I going to do this? And then we end up solving it. Because that's why I'm doing this, is because for the challenges, for the crazy moments.
Yeah.
And then you get such a reward because, it's kind of weird too, because it's not my dream, but I get so involved, it becomes my dream. And then at the end of it, it's oh my gosh, I made it happen. And that the challenge is why I'm doing this.
So you enjoy the challenge.
I enjoy the challenge. I enjoy the crazy hours. I enjoy, I'm not really that entertained when someone comes in and says, hey, make me a square box. No one really does that. But just for example, make me a square box that's blue. Already there's no challenge. Already it's oh, I know what that looks like. I like when a guy comes in and says, hey, I need to light myself on fire and not get hurt. But it needs to be real fire. And I need to be, oh, by the way, dropped in water afterwards with 20 handcuffs on me. And I need to be able to escape. It has to be done in a week. We're going to fly to England, and we're going to put it on Britain's Got Talent.
And it's going to be live.
It's going to be live. And we have one shot, and I really don't want to die. So can we figure out how this is going to work? That's the challenges I like. And that's why I do a lot of stuff with the entertainment industry, because it is kind of crazy people's dreams, and it always is kind of also last minute. And it makes it a lot of fun.
What's the funnest challenge you've ever had? What challenged you the most that you feel wow, I didn't think I was going to get through that, but I did?
So that would have to definitely be with magic and stunts. I can't reveal anything, of course, on here, but there's been many times where people are I want this item to shoot at me. I want this gun to shoot at me. I want this crossbow to shoot at my head. I want this flamethrower to go right past my face and actually look like it lights me on fire. Those kind of challenges are the ones that make me do, okay, now if this fails on stage, someone's going to die. Not if it fails on stage, that would be embarrassing. So if it fails on stage, maybe the audience will reveal the magic. That's not even that big a deal anymore. That used to be a big deal. But now it's if this goes the wrong direction, and hits this guy in the eye, he's dead. I'm the one that built it. And it's on live TV. What do I do then? So those challenges are definitely like the top tier of nerve-wracking, has to happen, has to work. And usually I'm on the side of the stage just praying, like, okay, let's get through this one. It should all work. We've tested everything, but did I test everything? Did I make sure everything is perfect? And I'm racking my brain at that moment, making sure I did. Okay, yeah, this should work. This should work. And in a perfect world, I'd have 2 months to build something like that. But usually, like I said before, it comes down to weeks, days, hours, sometimes even minutes. And sometimes you get in a situation where you're on a stage and you have 10 minutes to set something and something goes wrong. For example, one time we had a situation with crossbows and they had to aim at within inches of an area. Otherwise, the guy would get shot with a crossbow. So terrible. On literally live TV. Like, no time to cut in front of a live audience. And we get to the stage, which we practiced this 25, 30 times. And we get to the stage, and it turns out the stage is so cheaply built that it bounces. So the stage actually bounces, which means if anyone walks by these crossbows that we built on stands, they move like this. And they can't move like this, because then it hits the guy here instead of here. And we're like, oh my God, what do we do? So we had to come up with a solution, on the spot. And of course, it makes it thrilling for me. At the same time, sometimes I'm like, what did I just get myself into?
Very nerve-wracking.
This is so crazy. This is so nerve-wracking. Should I feel like it's the first day of school? I'm the most nervous kid ever. And that's how I feel a lot. But luckily, like, we get through it, and then it's kind of like that thrill when you get right off a roller coaster. And you're like, oh my gosh, I was scared, but this was amazing.
So you're like you're an inventor. I mean, you're a builder, but you also have to invent things because you're building concepts. Like, people bring you concepts that have never been done sometimes, right? So you've got to make it from scratch by inventing how it's going to work.
It's really nice sometimes when guys walk in and they're like, hey, make this out of this book. And then sometimes it's like, oh, that's kind of nice right now, because that's a little bit of a break. But 99% of the time, people walk in with an idea that's never been done. Not only has it not been done, but not thought of. Like, someone, like, if you were to talk it out or write it down, you'd say, no, don't do that. That's dangerous. Or no, how would that work? You can't make that work. That's physically impossible, or that hasn't been done before. And that's where the challenge comes in, is that every time we do something, it's an invention. And, I wish I could patent all these inventions and people would buy it, then I'd be a billionaire. But, each time it's a one-off. So you have to take what you've done in the past and then apply it to the new one. So luckily, you get in a routine where you're constantly inventing, but really you're just taking the last invention and the last 100 inventions and applying it to the new invention. So you get in a routine where it's not like an invention where, oh, I got an idea and it popped in my head. It's more like an invention with a ton of experience behind it. So it kind of is easier than the first invention. And when I first started doing this, of course, the challenges were harder. And now it's kind of like, oh yeah, I know what to do. In fact, sometimes I think I scale clients. They come in, they tell me an idea, and I'm like, yeah, no problem. They're like, what? I'm like, no, yeah, I got it. They're like, what, you didn't write anything down. And I kind of sometimes I feel like I'm that waiter that walks up and takes the order from like 50 people, and everyone's just sitting there like, I don't want onions on it, right? And the waiter's like, yeah, I got it. Sometimes I feel like that. And I have to actually, this is terrible, I sometimes have to act like I'm more concerned about the problem than I actually am. Because so many times people come in and it's like, okay, yeah, we got this. And they're shocked that I'm like, we got this. Because they've been to 20 other shops that don't really do what we do. And they've been told, no, that's impossible. Or, well, I can do that, but it's going to be a year and $50,000. And when they come in and I say, oh, yeah, we can do that for $2,000. I've actually had people not walk away, but like call me a week later and say, are you sure you can do this? Like, did you really listen to me? And I have to like go through it and explain to someone like, here's exactly what we're going to do in order to ease their concerns about my sometimes overconfidence,
Yeah.
But because we've done it, I mean, so many times with so many challenges, it makes it like, easy. Clients that know me and have been here before, they get to the point where they just kind of like call me up and tell me, hey, we need this and this and this. What's the quickest you can do it? And that's kind of great. But they get overconfident when I'm like, oh, I solved that one really hard problem. Now I need to solve every hard problem extremely quickly. But like I said, I'm in it for the challenge.
That's cool.
And I'm in it for the creativity of it, because it makes it so fun to create new things. I never, ever was interested whatsoever in building stuff growing up whatsoever, because I didn't realize you could build anything. Like, I didn't really get into this business until my mid-20s, because people were like, oh, it's fun to build stuff. And all I ever would think about is like, oh, what, build a house? Like, yeah, go work for a construction company, which no disrespect to anyone doing that. But to me, it's not exciting enough, because it's like, to build the first house would be exciting. The second one, I would have no interest in.
It's too regimented.
The same thing again, and it's been done for hundreds of years. I want the challenge that's never been done.
You want to keep creating new things.
Yeah, I want to create. I mean, that's the name of the company, right? We named it Cree8 after my nickname, Cree, and then added 8 to it, Cree8. So, I mean, all we're doing is creating all the time. I owe my mom for the name of it, too. I owe my brother for the nickname, and I owe my mom for, hey, why don't you just call it Cree8? I'm like, good one.
Cree8 Studios, I love it.
Yeah, but we constantly are looking for that challenge. I mean, we built many different things, and we could have gone down any avenue of like, oh, let's just build cars. Let's just build, set pieces, which is fun, but it's really fun to wrap them all into it and then tell people, hey, we want to do the craziest car, or the, coolest, most technical set piece. We're trying to go for the most challenges, which, because at the end of the day, it's like you get the biggest, wow feeling inside your heart. You're like, oh my gosh, that wasn't possible. We made it possible.
Yeah. One of my favorite stories I have with Cree is it was New Year's Eve at one of the biggest nightclubs in Vegas, and they wanted a DeLorean. Do you remember this story?
Yeah, of course I do.
And Cree, did you have the real DeLorean, or did you make the DeLorean?
We had a real DeLorean we had built for a magician for America's Got Talent. So we had the DeLorean, and from what I remember, the choreographer who you were involved with wanted this really cool set piece. They wanted it inside, and we already had the DeLorean. We'd already built the Back to the Future car, and we've been given the measurements on how to get this car into the venue. That's another thing. When you're building something, or when you're doing anything for someone else, you've got to make sure you have the same perception that they have on everything. And sometimes you're told measurements, or you're told an idea, and not to anyone's fault, but it turns out to be something not understood. And it turns out to be like, hey, guess what? The DeLorean doesn't fit in the doors, which technically they should have, but what was measured wasn't exactly the right measurement. So it turned out we had to take this DeLorean and within a few hours build a rack system to take the DeLorean from this style car to, in fact, let me show you.
By the way, he skipped the really cool part where they were trying to get in the building. They had all this security, right? There it is, a little mini version.
We had to turn it this way to get it inside the doors.
Okay. So the producers and choreographers were like, this isn't going to happen. They basically almost threw their hands up, right? They were like, "Not this. We can't make this work." And Cree was like, "No, we're going to make this work." And that's what I love about you, because like your mindset's like, I'm not giving up. No, I'm going to figure it out. Like, we're going to make this happen, when a lot of other people just throw their hands up. And so at that moment when Cree said, no, we'll make this work, I don't know how yet, but I'll be right back. He goes to the shop, he brainstorms. I don't know how long did it take you to figure that out?
I think basically the drive. We were driving. I'm like, can't we just turn it sideways and build a rack? I mean, I have giant wheels. You know what's funny is usually it's not solving the problem. It's usually making sure I have the right equipment to solve the problem. I usually start with like, well, geez, I mean, I need something strong enough to be able to hold the DeLorean. Okay, do I have caster wheels that are strong enough? I do. Okay, let's build from there.
So it's working with what you have.
Yes. In my head, it's usually a building block of what do I have laying around, or what can I get right now. And honestly, 90% of the time, it's a budget situation too. Like, how can I do this, still make money, and walk away? Because I mean, anything can be solved if the budget is, unlimited. Then it's like, oh, buy this, buy that, go rent a forklift and turn it sideways. But sometimes it's like the client's gonna be like, well, no, I'm gonna pay $100,000 to get a DeLorean in the building. Well, I'm not gonna rent a forklift for for 5 days. Just we need it for 1 hour. So
Right.
it gets in a situation where like you've got to take the building blocks around you and make it all connect. And that's what happened. I was on the drive back. I was like, wait, I know how to do this now. And also, it's a matter of I'm constantly trying to learn more and more skills, because one little skill here and one little skill here, you start putting them all together. And then things are like, I can do that. That's easy. It all adds up. So one thing you should definitely remember if you're working on your creative mindset is constantly keep an open mind and constantly continue to build your skills, no matter what. Because just one example, welding, for example, it speeds everything up so fast, and everyone thinks it's this really completely unfathomable skill. It's really not that hard. Once you get into it, it's just a matter of practice. It's kind of like riding a bike. At first, it's like, oh my God, I'm going to kill myself, I'm going to fall down. Same thing with anything. Once you do it 100 times, it's like, I got it. I know what to do. And then you apply these different things together, and it's like, oh, I can build that so quickly because I have the right equipment and because I have the right skills. So you take the skills, take the equipment, and then if you're creative, you can solve any problem.
Wow. So you have to be resourceful, an inventor, creative, problem solver, like all wrapped into one.
Yeah, but you know what? I think more than anything, it's just about having the right attitude and not throwing your hands up. Like you said, they wanted to throw their hands up. I hate that. I can't go to bed at night thinking, oh man, we were that close and we failed. Because you know what happens? 2 days later, I do. Why couldn't I have just done this? And then I'm mad at myself. I'm like, I could have just done this, and it would have worked. And that's another thing. Was like sometimes you, unfortunately, when you're trying to solve a problem, you have to kind of take the bull by its horns in a way and be like, no, we got this. In fact, there's times I'm like, I don't even tell the client how we're gonna do it. I'm like, no, we got it. Don't worry. Just go do whatever you gotta do. And when later on, it'll be here. The magic trick will be here. The DeLorean will magically appear there. So it's just, and that happened a lot too with doing stuff for TV. There's so many people involved in producing a TV show that a lot of times I keep everyone in the dark until the last second. I know it's gonna work, but it might be not. Other people might not be able to imagine what I'm imagining, and so a lot of times it was like, hey, don't worry about it. It's gonna be fine. I've had to actually learn that trait of like acting overconfident and making people not worry.
Yeah. And then at times having to act worried because they think you're too calm. It's like this balance.
It really is. It's a balance. I think I call it customer service.
Yeah.
No, it's like, oh, everything's fine. Oh no, this might be a little challenging.
Yeah. Wow. So what do you do? Like, for a lot of people, myself included, we get rattled like, oh my gosh, this conflict just came up. And to you, it seems like it just rolls off your shoulders really quickly. Or maybe that's what I perceive it to be. But how do you deal with that mentally? Like, what's going on in your head that you're able to push through those barriers?
Well, it's not like I have a special skill or I'm doing anything different than anyone else does. I, of course, get rattled too. I, of course, have moments where I'm like, oh my God, how am I going to do this? But because I've been doing it so long, and also it requires me to eat and to live to get these challenges accomplished. If I just fail every 10th one, I'm going to lose all my profits. So I've been taught in my head. It's like self-taught. Like, you have to get this done. Otherwise, you don't get money, which means how do you pay your rent? How do you eat? So I feel like, I've told people this many times, like, there's like a difference between like being forged in fire, right? You're forged in fire in an aspect. What I'm trying to say by that is like having to do something will force you to get it done. Like if you have the attitude of like, oh, I want to write a book, right? And you're like, oh, I'll get to it. I have my other job, blah, blah. You may never ever force yourself to do it. But Stephen King, after he wrote his first book, was like, oh my gosh, this was great, got so much money. And, he's getting published. I mean, he's getting published, but it's all about the next book, right? He's got to write another book. Mm-hmm. So he's got to force himself to, okay, what's the next story? I have ideas. I need to apply all those ideas and make it happen. And then, how many books has he wrote now? Hundreds. Wow. Because that became his living. I feel like a lot of times, and a long time ago, someone told me this. I said, if you want to do this for a living, throw yourself 100% into it and do it. Mm-hmm. Which I've noticed some people are like, oh, I want to be creative. I want to be a painter. I want to be a writer. I want to build stuff. But they're doing another job or they're doing 50 other things. And that's like, they put that as a hobby. Mm. I think by putting myself completely in it and saying, okay, you have to do this. This is how you want to make your living. You have to do it. Forces you to adapt to the situation and do it.
All or nothing.
All or nothing. Yeah, totally all or nothing. Because if you have, also one other thing is I try not to have any plan Bs. I try to say, okay, this is what the client wants. It's up to me, the method. I've got to make it happen. The end result has to be what the client wants. No matter what the method is, I've told many clients, we're not doing it this way because it's a better version to do it this way, which is true. Sometimes the clients will design it, and I'll have to redesign it in order to make it work. But the end result is the same. So you have to kind of just have that idea of like, it's going to work. I have to make it work. There's no plan B. And that forces you, after a few times, not to be rattled anymore. And you gain confidence with time.
The more you do it.
The more you do it, the more you're like, oh my gosh, this is great. It also has 100% to do with, are you enjoying doing it? Are you having fun doing it? Because if you're really not having fun ever, then it's probably the wrong thing you're doing. I mean, I see a lot of people in my industry who are miserable all the time. Like they may like, oh, I like to do this, but these challenges is too much. I'm like, you're in the wrong business. I mean, change your business, do something different. You have to be able to have fun doing it, because if it's not fun, then I mean, you only live once, right? You might as well do stuff you like and have fun with it. Otherwise, you're like wasting every day and wasting your life. Another thing about not being rattled is like I said before, having the skills, constantly playing the long game in the aspect of like, okay, I want to be quicker at these things. What do I need to do now to learn these things? And with learning stuff, it never, ever, ever happens. If it's a hard thing to learn, it never happens overnight. It's like you have to recondition your brain to actually absorb that knowledge. This is what I've heard. I'm not a psychologist, but like I've heard that, you got to spend enough time with something to actually absorb it and get good at it. And I've witnessed that so many times at my shop. Guys come in and they're smart, intelligent guys, and they want to learn. They want to learn what I'm doing. They want to work for me and build stuff. And then I watch them and I noticed that their like muscles in their hands are not used to doing this kind of work. So like I say, grind a piece of metal, and it's like they're fumbling and they can't figure out how to grind the metal. And it takes a while for your brain to connect with your muscles to say, this is how you grind metal. I mean, that's a really simple skill, but it applies to everything. It applies to sewing or painting or airbrushing or welding. It's like you have to connect your muscles with your brain, and it takes a little while. So I always tell people, no, don't think you can't do it. Just give yourself enough time to get good at it. A lot of people will give up so quickly. Like, oh, can you do this? And with my employees, a lot of guys come in from the entertainment industry, guys from the circus, guys who used to, have a crossbow act or whatever, and they are good at building, but they're not used to exactly how we do stuff here. And so it takes them a little while to learn. And sometimes they're like, oh, here, you do this. And I'll purposely be like, no, you do it. You do it. If you fail 20 times, that's fine, because I know a month from now, you're going to be a really reliable employee. And you're going to do everything exactly how I want, because you've had to do it. If you do it, you're eventually going to get good at it. And another part of not getting rattled is I feel like if you prepare properly for like the long game of stuff, like let's say, for example, you want to start a business like fixing motorcycles. The best thing to do is to start thinking of the long game of that. Like, start off small and build up to that. Like, you don't need every tool in the world at first. Start with, whatever, like, you're going to fix these parts. Then slowly build up, but always be thinking of next month, I want to be able to do this. And you start buying the tools to start obtaining the knowledge for that. So it's like you have to play this long game if you want to continue being successful and not being overwhelmed. Because you're rattled when you're overwhelmed. And we've all been there, and I've been there millions of times where I'm so overwhelmed and I've got to stay up an extra 10 hours to get a project done. But like I said, I am in it for the challenge, and I am in it for the learning experience. And that's the other thing. You cannot have a closed brain. You've got to have an open mind all the time. You've got to constantly, this is funny to say, I'm constantly looking at how other people do things, not to emulate them or copy them, but to get little tips like, oh, look how he's building this. Look how he welded that, or look how these two pieces of metal, they connected. That's interesting. I'm going to apply that to mine. And even if you don't apply 100%, you might apply 2%. If you're really, like I said, if you're really interested in something and this is fun for you, you're going to be engrossed in it anyway. You're going to be on Instagram scrolling through people that are doing the same thing you're doing, and you're going to be like, oh, wow, that's a good tip. Another interesting thing that I constantly tell myself when I'm frustrated, and it's, 4 a.m., and I'm supposed to have something done and on a stage by 9 o'clock the next morning for 25 dances to rehearse. And I'm thinking, how am I going to get this done? If there's a problem where I can't figure out, I always say to myself, which is what Einstein said, was you got to stay with a problem long enough to solve it. So many people come up with 5 solutions in their brain. Like, well, no, this has never been done before. I can't find it on Google. I can't find this. There's no book for that. They give up. But if you spend enough time with it, most likely your brain will solve the problem. And that even comes down to one of those situations where, like, you might walk away from the problem and all of a sudden it pops in your brain. And that happens constantly to me. That's why it is nice to have a lot of time sometimes to build stuff, because then, 4 days later after you thought about it and you thought, is there any way of doing this? I've searched Google. I've looked in every book I've ever had. I've talked to 9 people, and nobody had the concept on how to come up with a better way of doing this or the way to do it. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, wait, why didn't I think of that before? It will just pop into your brain, because your brain, even when you're not thinking about it, it's still subconsciously going through the routines. And I think that's what Einstein meant by spending enough time with the problem. Like, the exact quote was something like, I'm not smarter than anybody else, but I just spend more time with the problem to solve it. And I've literally been in situations where I've told myself that many times. Also, another really good thing, and this is from my mom, and she's, a little bit higher than Einstein. Honestly, I really think she might be. Is basically, if you had to do it or you would die, what would you do? So, like, if your life depended on it, would you solve the problem? And that's very much what they teach you in the military. Like in the Marine Corps, they teach you all this problem solving, because you literally would die if you can't solve problems quickly on the fly with limited resources. There's many times in the Marine Corps where they'll give you a log, right? They're like, okay, you got 15 of you guys have to get this log over these 5 walls and underneath this barbed wire. And you're like, all 5 of us can't even lift this log. So, but immediately you think, we can't lift a log. When the truth is, you don't have to lift. No one said lift a log. And it turns out what you do is, you create this dragging system with a poncho and all these different things. And all of a sudden it's like, hey, we solved that. And of course, at that moment, you're like, ha-ha, see, we used our brain and it worked. So my entire life, I've always told myself, well, my life depended on it. My life depended on it. Could I get this done? Could I make it happen? And it sounds stupid because, I'm building a set piece or a prop. But like I said, in the midnight hours, when I don't think I have enough time and my crew's already gone home, I start telling myself, well, if your life depended on it, could you get it done? And for example, just recently, I had to build a bunch of props for a Star Wars fan film, which is a film that's done by fans really, really well, though, like a couple $100,000 budget, based around the Star Wars story.
It was really neat, by the way. I'll have to link it.
Yeah, it's cool. It's on YouTube really, really well. But I had to build a bunch of props for them. And the night before I was supposed to be there, which it turned out it's in the middle of nowhere. We didn't realize we had like a 17-hour drive to get the props to the place. I thought I had that 17 hours for building time. Turns out I didn't. And at the time, a couple of my guys called in sick, and a few other things happened, would put me in a situation where, like, how am I going to build this prop by tomorrow morning and get on the road and drive to the middle of nowhere and this thing needed to look really good. It needed to be like just like Star Wars film, just how it was, how they built it with a huge budget and tons of time. But I literally told myself, you know what? Go as hard as you can go all night, like you're not tired, and act like at the end of the day you're gonna get $20 million for it. So like I tricked my own mind just to work really hard and not give up, and it turned out great. And that was one of those moments where I'm like, oh my God, I'm so glad I was able to like train my mind just to say go, 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 and don't give up. Because I've seen a lot of people give up, and I'm like, what do you mean? Why are you giving up? Well, I mean, and it's like if you get in a routine where like I only work 8 hours a day, and I do this and this and this, and this usually takes this long. You gotta sometimes step out of that usual. And you gotta say, I don't care, it's gonna happen. And I feel like a lot of like great athletes and great inventors and stuff have that attitude of like, no, it's gonna happen. I'm gonna push. And many times I've been in that situation where I'm like, I've got to make it happen, and it happened. And then you feel so good. You're like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. Everyone's happy. It's on time. It's so great. But so that's what I do when I'm rattled. That's what I just push forward, and I try to apply everything I know and have the attitude of it's gonna happen. It has to happen.
Otherwise, I'm gonna die.
If my life depended on it, right? If my life depended on it.
Yeah. So I know you have a funny story because you were talking about earlier about the client's perception, what they perceive compared to what you're perceiving that they're explaining to you. So I remember you made a bee. Can you tell the bee story?
Yes. This is completely about perception, 100%. And this comes down to, like, everyone's always like, when you look back on something, you're like, well, why didn't you guys draw it out? Or why didn't this happen? Well, sometimes in the moment, when you only have a certain amount of time, you expect everyone to be on the same page. And sometimes you're on page 5 and someone else is on page like 1500. And you find out like, whoa, what just happened? In a perfect world, I draw stuff out, I meet with people, I run it by them, and that usually comes out exactly how someone else wants it. And once again, I'm building someone else's dream, Someone else comes to me like, I want this. And you try to do, oh, okay, I got it in my mind, and then you try to make it. So what happened was, and this like I said, goes down to perception, and it's funny. One time I got a call from a guy at a major resort casino out here who I dealt with hundreds of times and always been really easy to work with. We've always been on the same page, never had a problem, and he's always more than happy with what we build. Usually we build better versions of what he wanted. He's usually more impressed. Well, in this case, it didn't go that way. So this time, this guy called me up and said, hey, we need a giant bee, and we need it built by tomorrow morning. Can you do this? And I was like, well, wait. It's 7 o'clock at night. Tell me all the details. He's like, just a big bee. We're going to put it inside the pool at the casino, and it's going to be floating. Like, so it's got to float, and it's got to be a big bee. He's like, exactly. Really simple. As simple as you can make it. I'm like, so we built it out of styrofoam. He's like, yeah, styrofoam, whatever. I don't know. Just how you know what to do. Build it. So I even say to him, like, what colors are it? You want black and yellow? He's like, yeah, black and yellow. Doesn't matter. Any kind of just, whatever you want, whatever you got, however you can make it happen. Major client, budget's not much of an issue. So I'm like, well, I'm going to stay up all night. I got to like get material, which I don't have. He's like, honestly, man, the budget's like $10,000. And I'm like, whoa, $10,000 in like 10 hours. So I can get, that's a lot of money to make. That's like, oh boy, I got a lot of bills to pay. That's going to solve a lot of problems. So of course I'm like all into it now. I'm like calling friends, doing, you have any styrofoam? You have any styrofoam? Calling Home Depot. Usually I have a few days to get materials. This case, no. So I called the guy back a few hours later. I'm like, listen, I got the materials. I want to make sure we're on the same page. Everything's good. You want like wings on it, and I can use the wings to help make it float or whatever. He's like, yeah, that's awesome. I don't care. It's just a giant bee, and like 10 foot long and like 7 foot wide or whatever. So I'm like, okay, cool. So we stay up all night sculpting and building this giant bee. I'm researching bees online to get the exact eyes of the bee perfectly right. And, and this is a little bit before everybody had an iPhone. So I wasn't able to snap a photo halfway through and send to this guy. And it's like 2 a.m. So we're just going to build this bee and drop it off. And we figure, hopefully it's going to look good. So by like 7 in the morning, the thing is amazing looking. Got giant wings. It's, looks like a giant bee. And it's like perfect. So I call the guy up, I'm like, hey, we're done. We're gonna bring it over. He's like, okay, cool, man. I have a check for you, whatever. I'm like, okay, cool. We go over to the casino. I put this giant bee on the back of my Jeep at the time, and we're driving down, the Vegas Strip with this bee on the back of it. We get there, and we go in, and we find some of the entertainment directors, and they're like, oh, you have the bee? Okay, cool. Put it in the pool. We're like, okay, we'll put it in the pool. So we get in, and we put it in the pool. And we're like, very proud of this. And we're like, this is cool. We're snapping some photos. And the guy who I've been dealing with walks out completely shocked, looking at this giant bee like we just shot his mother or something. And he's like, what is that? What is that? What are you joking? Please tell me you're joking, because what is this? And we're like, what's wrong? We're thinking, did we make it too big? Is it too cartoon looking? Did it need him to look more realistic? Or is it too realistic? And look more like, I'm totally confused. And he's like, what did you make? And I'm like, a giant bee. He's like, no, man, no. The letter B. It's supposed to be the letter B. And of course, I'm like, what? Huh? You wanted a letter B? $10,000 letter B? I'm in complete shock. And then he tells me, it's for Britney Spears' birthday party. We want a giant bee to float in the pool for her birthday party, just like for Britney. And of course, I'm like, I'm complete shock. I'm thinking, I even said, do you want wings on it? And he says to me, I thought you meant like water wings, like the water wings to make it float. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like the craziest misperception on both parts I've ever dealt with. And
what did you do?
So of course I'm like, I can make a letter B in like 2 hours. I thought you wanted this giant. And the guy is so cool. He like pretty much laughs it off and says, if you can make me a letter B in like 2 hours, awesome. Like literally like rush back to your shop, make me a B. I'll pay you more money. You just name how much money we need to pay you. And I'm like, I can cut a letter B out in like an hour. Like this is the easiest project ever that I turned into the hardest project ever. So we literally rush back to my shop, build the letter B, paint it like pink, come back over. Now the funny part about it is, at this point, I'm thinking, what am I gonna do with this giant bee? Am I gonna like hang it in my shop? Are we gonna like set it on the side of the highway to be funny? I have no idea. And he tells me, oh no, please leave the giant bee, because Britney Spears saw that and she thought it was so funny. She wants us to leave it and we're gonna put the other bee next to it. So I'm like, okay. And it was great. It all worked out. I got paid more money. I got to make a giant bee and a giant bee. It was hilarious. But once again, it could have gone terribly wrong. It could have been like, what did you build? You ruined the whole event. And that's why, like now, anytime anyone calls me about a letter, even though B is pretty much the only letter I can think of that can be confusing with an insect, is I make sure I know for a fact what they want. But it definitely taught me a lesson about making sure everyone's on the same page and we're all perceiving it the same exact way. And, luckily nothing like that really happened before or again. And hopefully, if it does happen again, everything would go just as fun and create another funny story.
Everything's a learning experience.
Yes. Yeah, that was a fun one. And we got pictures later of Britney Spears and her friends, trying to ride on top of this floating styrofoam bee. So it turned out to be great,
That's so funny. So what would you say, what would be, to close this out, what would be your message to other creatives? What would be your advice to them?
Good question. Everyone is different. So like advice, I've always taken advice kind of with a grain of salt, because I kind of just like lead my own way and do my own thing. But I do like to hear little bits and pieces from people. And I always kind of just break it down to a couple of things. Number one, whatever you're doing in life, whatever, if you can have fun, if you can make money and make a living doing something you really enjoy, whether it's writing, dancing, anything, that's the number one key. If you have that, you're going to be happy and you're going to push forward and you're going to become successful. And I mean, I've heard that many times too, like, oh, find something you love and then you'll never feel like you work a day of your life. You're still going to work. Trust me, you're still going to work, but it's going to be way more fun work than you're doing something you don't like. That. Number two, I would say always constantly be trying to think ahead as far as whatever it is, whether it is, hey, I'm building stuff out of my garage, and one day I want to have a more professional shop. Constantly keep that in your mind. Never ever tell yourself like, oh, that's not possible. I'm not going to make enough money to do that. Just constantly think, how can I make it happen? And you'll be able to make it happen. And then next thing you know, you're in a giant shop and you're doing exactly what you love, and you're like, wow, how did this happen? And it's because you like what you do, and you also are thinking ahead. And number three, keep an open mind. Constantly learn. Constantly take criticism and switch it around and make it constructive. I've got a lot of negative criticism of, why do you do it like this? Like, oh, that's not the way I've seen it done before. Or whatever. And it's good to take criticism, no matter what, negative or positive, and try to swing it around and make it work for you. Because it's part of the learning experience. So you're constantly learning. So you keep an open mind about everything. Like, look at how other people do stuff, and then try to learn from that. And never ever have the attitude of you know everything. That's exactly when you stop learning. So constantly trying to keep an open mind and learn. Those are probably the three best tips I could give. They're general tips.
Oh, those are great tips. Thank you so much, Cree. This was such an awesome time we had together. I love your stories. You're a great storyteller. He's not even an entertainer, but you would think he is because, well, you're around a lot of entertainers, but you're very entertaining, very inspiring, and just thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you. I'm so honored to be here. It's so much fun, and I can't wait to watch all your podcasts. You're amazing.
Thank you. I'm going to link Cree's website and his Instagram if you want to go check him out. He's got some awesome things he posts. And thank you so much, Cree. And I hope you have a great rest of your night.
I will. Thank you.
It's Priscilla Pfeiffer. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Please subscribe, leave a comment so I can reach more people like you. And go to sparkyourinnerfire.com. I have a special gift for you. Go check it out.